Hello, my name is Alicia Shapiro with AInews.com, and welcome to another episode of Driving Tomorrow Conversations with Industry Leaders, where we explore the real world impact of artificial intelligence across industries. Businesses today are dealing with a growing disconnect between the tools they buy and the workflows they actually need. Teams are juggling dozens of platforms, yet still are relying on spreadsheets and manual processes to fill the gaps. At the same time, AI is opening the door to a different approach, one where teams can build their own software tailored to how they actually operate. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Shiran Brodie, Head of Marketing at Softr, a platform used by over 1 million builders worldwide, including teams at Netflix, Google, Stripe, and UPS. Shiran brings more than a decade of experience leading full funnel marketing and growth for product-led tech companies, including her role in scaling and rebranding Integromat into Make. In today's conversation, we'll explore what that really takes to turn AI-generated ideas into usable business software and why more teams are starting to build instead of buy. So thank you for joining us today, Sharon.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm excited to get into this conversation. So let's start with the big picture. I'm hearing a lot about AI building apps and replacing traditional software, and there's other companies out there that are doing that with vibe coding. From your perspective, what's actually changing in how businesses build and use software today?
Yeah, so I think I'm will probably speak a little bit from where I saw things several years ago
Mhm.
and where I've seen it since AI has entered the picture.
Yeah.
So I've been in this automation, no code, low code, like operations market for 10 years. And when I was at Make, and Make is also the no code automation platform, I used to spend a lot of time speaking with customers, and oftentimes I would hear a lot of people talk about whether or not you're building an application, whether you're automating a workflow.
Mhm.
Oftentimes it's really there just to solve the same types of pain points, right? Someone has something that they need to get done on a daily basis or something their team needs to execute on, and they encounter some pain points. It's either inefficient, or they're doing just won't scale with the way their company needs to grow. And so typically, or they don't even have anything, there's something that they need to do and they don't have a solution yet to solve that. And so in the past, the options were always three. So, and what I heard the most often was either buy software to solve the problem. So, this could be an automation platform, but more commonly at the time, it was like this type of out of box software. So, there's a million softwares out there for different industries, for different workflows. And that was always one option. Second option was hire a developer. And this is typically when you need something very custom where these types of vertical solutions don't actually, they just can't solve the problem. And so you need to build it custom, and you typically hired a developer to do that. And then the third was you just live with it, right? So you either just stay in those spreadsheets, you do things very manually. And it's very interesting when people when you get people comfortable enough to talk to you about the things that they're most embarrassed about. It's almost always more people than you realize are still living in spreadsheets, and they're working in pretty big companies. So I think live with the pain is actually a very common alternative. And so I think a few years later, when no code started helping open up the market, it allowed a lot of people to build their own solutions without having to rely on a developer.
Mhm.
But one fundamental problem that still existed is that you do still need an understanding of database structure, of logic, of system building in order to actually build those solutions. And so, even though no code and low code helped to remove the need of coding to be an absolute requirement, you still also needed to learn the platform. You needed to understand those concepts in addition to being a systems thinker. And
Mhm.
honestly, unless you really had the motivation to do, you would potentially hit a good amount of barriers, especially when you're trying to put it into production. So
Mhm.
I think where AI has really changed the game. And honestly, when it started to first become really mainstream, it was an incredible feeling because having spoken to hundreds, thousands at this point of people, and also the struggle as a marketer to just help them even understand that there is the option to build custom, right? Because many people are not even seeing that as an option, let alone themselves being able to do it. I think AI has now made people realize what's possible. And it's made people feel like for the first time, this is something that's in reach. And I think this is across a spectrum. Obviously, it starts from I have an idea. How
Mhm.
do I get this developer to understand that idea? And that's now I can generate a UI snapshot of that, like a prototype, all the way now to, okay, I used AI to build this tool what else is possible? And I think that's really where I've seen the big unlock in terms of how AI has drastically shifted how people perceive the idea of custom actually being an option.
It is exciting because once you realize you can do things without knowing how to code and build tools for your workflows, it does open up that possibility of, oh, what else can I do? And it's just exciting right now, for sure. And most companies, like we said, they have dozens of tools and they're still relying on the spreadsheets and workarounds. What's fundamentally broken in how businesses build or adopt software today that's blocking?
And I think this will also probably shed light on why AI has been so transformative. There have been obviously major trends, major shifts throughout the recent years. Tech has many moments of disruption, but I think what makes AI truly transformative in just ways we have never seen before is that for the first time, the idea of, and I'll explain a bit more just to the question you asked, now one size fits all doesn't have to be my issue when it comes to adopting software. And I think that's really been what's holding a lot of companies back. So I think there's several things. And I've honestly debated, this is where I have found a lot of what prospects, customers have shared firsthand to be fascinating because I myself am a builder and I am a very passionate builder. So I don't use spreadsheets unless I really have to. But then I see so many people where I speak to them, you're using the software you've adopted many platforms and some of them even modern SaaS platforms that many people argue are literally designed to be as modern and usable as possible. So why are they still not using it? And I think a few areas that I've seen is number one, at least like with SaaS tools, they impose an opinion on the end user, the end adopter. So meaning that let's say that you're purchasing a CRM, no one's processes look the same internally. So what that funnel looks like, how you define a prospect, how you define a potential deal, all of these things can vary according to the industry, according to the company. And so unless the software itself is very bendable and like flexible, you almost always spend more time than you anticipated in making it work for you. And as someone who's had to do this, even with me building out a lot of custom systems myself, and that's why I do build out a lot of things myself, because I can no longer live in rigid SaaS software. This is something that they don't have a platform that allows it to do that. Spreadsheets are still, ironically, not scalable, but they are flexible, right? You can make it look however you want it to look. You can manage things in different ways. Does it work effectively? Is it secure at scale? Is it efficient? No, but it is familiar. And that's the other piece is that there's zero onboarding cost here. So when you have to roll out a SaaS tool, you have to train, you have to document, you need a champion, you need change management internally. And I think now a company can bring that in, right? And they can be a champion and they can create all of the internal documentation. They can manage all of these things. And it's very hard to get people to adopt it if it's overwhelming, if the interface is hard to understand. Because at the end of the day, that company is not grading their performance in how well they adopted that tool, right? That's not how performance is judged internally, let's be honest. So I think they're always going to prioritize the things that are helping them win and as an employee within that company. And honestly, learning that software is just not it. So I think that's a big part of it. And then the last piece I think of as well is this is the trap of software in general. It's like this sprawling tool stack. Software might get you 80% of the way there, but that 20% that you really need to have, which isn't in that tooling, which these side cases, these edge cases, which exist everywhere, you end up just bringing it. You need more and more tools to adopt. The bigger your stack, the larger your stack, the more tools you need to learn, the less likely it is that people are going to adopt all of them at scale.
It's interesting you said that these tools will kind of get you there 80% of the way, but you still need some technical setup to make them more secure and reliable in the real world settings. What did Softr have to solve in order to make those AI generated tools and apps usable for real business operations?
Yeah, that's a great question. So maybe let me just preface this by saying a little bit about what Softr was even prior to this kind of AI emergence. So Softr was started as a no-code platform for building business software. And the idea was we have these sets of building blocks that, first of all, let's just start with this, that majority of software that you see is composed of these types of building blocks that you might see over and over again. So charts, tables, all of these things you just see across all business software. And so Softr was designed to give people the flexibility and the customization to take these blocks, customize them, and build out whatever it is that they need to be able to easily connect their data sources, to compose the views, the actions that they need different types of users to take. So Interestingly enough, we designed these blocks. These are handcrafted building blocks. They were designed with best practices in mind. They were designed with our business users in mind. And remember that we have over 1 million users that have been using Softr. So we've been speaking to these customers. We've been receiving their feedback on what they need, what they don't need. And our goal as a platform, which is, I think, really what makes Softr super unique, is that even before AI, our biggest belief has always been, and I think very differentiated and unique in that space, is we want to make it as easy as possible, where it's the user's only job is to understand their own business requirements, their own needs, and we take care of everything else. Now, of course, in no code, at the end of the day, it's not like with AI where it's generating it for you. You still have to put these things together, and it still helps to understand that in the first place. But all of the security, all of the hosting, the permissioning, all of these things that are really difficult, Softr as a platform handles for you. So now fast forward into AI, and I think if we take a look at other vibe coding tools in the space, they're really nice. Everyone, and I think many people coming into this for the first time who have not been around the block for as many years, you'd be surprised how many people are like, oh, I just generated this beautiful looking UI. It's ready to go. Let me just hit publish. And it's, oh, wait, this isn't working. This isn't like, oh, I can't, why isn't it working? Why can't I share it? Why can't I? And then that's for the people that are comfortable enough to do that. In the business world, most people are not even comfortable enough to take the risk that hitting that button is going to actually allow them to deploy an app. So oftentimes they might play around with it in the safety of these fun side hobby projects or websites. But when it comes down to real business use cases, they're not quite there yet. And I think we're Softr, going back to here is a platform that we've built that is incredible. And when we launched the new version of this new AI building experience, we're still building on top of that same foundation. But this time, our AI co-builder is built to solve a few things that just don't currently exist today. One is that when you type into the AI co-builder, it's asking you the right clarifying questions to help get you to, almost like it's helping scope out what your app should be based on your business requirements, based on your problem, based on what it is that you're looking to do. It generates the entire app for you. So this isn't just the app UI screen. So this is generating the database, which is obviously the underlying way you're going to store and manage that data, which also is something you can keep adding. You can visually see, you can add data, what I'll show in a little while. It generates all of the app pages for you. It assembles all of those building blocks, those secure building blocks that I was referring to, the ones that have been tested on our foundation. So maybe just quick caveat, when you use a vibe coding tool, you're generating code from scratch. So this is raw, untested code that has never worked in production before. That's not the case with Softr. With Softr, you are assembling building blocks that have already been battle tested for several years and are secure, have all of these like permissioning, all of these things built in by default. So you're just setting them up, or the AI is assembling and setting them up. And then, of course, like all of the most difficult parts of software building that any normal user would never actually understand, they actually need to build software. So it's not just about hitting the publish button, right? It's also about user permissioning, what different users should be able to actually see and do, off, allowing users to log in securely without leaking or potentially causing any type of harm to your company in terms of the data that's being stored. The hosting, the platform, you don't have to worry about dealing with vibe coding tools. Many people are coming back afterwards and saying, oh, it looked great when they do get to the launch point. I was able to launch it, but now this bug happened, or I tried to scale this new users and this, and now I'm running into this. And so they end up being this person who was just supposed to solve a business problem to now playing developer, but except they have no developer knowledge, right? So it's like we almost go backwards in time, where it's okay, so we're taking way longer to get to a custom solution that's going to end up in a graveyard, because unless we have the funds to pay a developer to build and maintain it for us, right? And so
Yeah.
Softr, the whole concept of Softr is, okay, you spin this up, you hit that publish button, that's a live app in production. Those logins, all those things are already built in by default. You share that app, you can scale that app with as many users as you need. And myself, I built out a content management portal for freelancers, built it in an hour and a half in an afternoon. It already had freelancers working and getting their assignments within the hour. And we still use that. We've scaled that beyond. We have now over 20 to 30 freelancers that are using it. We have other platforms we've built internally that have much more. We've never had to debug anything.
That is so impressive. And I love that you said that your code is already battle tested. It's proven code. It's not like the other platforms that the AI is just generating it, like you said, and there's not been tested, and who knows if it's right. So that's so amazing. I just love this concept, and I don't think anyone else is doing this yet. At least I haven't seen it. So I'd love for you to walk us through a real example, either a client portal or your
Yes.
internal tool, to show how a team would go from idea to something they're actually using. And feel free to share your screen, because I think this is what's going to make a difference for people.
Yes, so you can see my screen right now.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So this is the Softr Studio. And really quick before I jump into that, I'll just want to just point out some important things. So with Softr, you have applications, you have databases. So as I mentioned before, and I'll show you when we do the demo, that you can also just manage your data alone in a database. It's a visual database where you can edit, add columns, do it. It's like a spreadsheet style, but way more powerful database. It's a product inside of Softr. We also have workflow automation, which means you can connect end-to-end workflows across your database, across your app, across any other tool in your tech stack. And you can also inject AI agents. So you can call an LLM whenever you want to add AI into those workflows. And we have forms as well. We basically have everything you need to build that business solution that you're looking to build. So right now I'm in this chat interface and I'm just going to ask it to build me a client portal for my marketing agency. Now, this is a really obviously bare bones prompt. I just want to add that you can get as detailed as you want your prompt to be, even from that initial flow, and you don't have to wait until the end. So right now, I'm asking this, and you'll notice that the co-builder is asking questions. So it wants to know exactly what I expect the clients to be able to do in this portal. So it's already named some workflows that are pretty typical for client portal. As I mentioned before, I could come into this with already knowing the workflows and I just can detail them in that initial prompt. But in this case, I'm going to say that I want it to do, let's say, all of the above. And how do I want to organize work for clients? So meaning, what do I want clients to be able to actually see in this portal? So do I want it to be able to see projects and the tasks? So I want to be able to see the campaigns and assets or the retainers. What do I want them to be able to actually have access to? I'm just going to say to use a standard setup here. And then who will use the portal? And this is also important because I also mentioned previously, which is very unique to Softr, you can create super custom experiences according to the different types of users you have. So you can work within one portal, like that's your application, but clients can see and do something different across that portal. You can have your internal team members. Let's say your head of finance only sees and approves invoices, and then your internal account managers only see and work with the accounts that they have access to. You can deal with all of that directly here. And in this case, I'm going to say that I would want both my clients and my internal team to be able to access the portal. And by the way, these initial things, sometimes people don't actually know, right? They're not
Yeah.
going in writing this prompt. They're not thinking. And I should also caveat, not everyone is coming in thinking they want a client portal either. They just know they have a problem with sharing information externally or doing these things. But I think what's really unique and incredible about Softr is we're also basing this off of millions of use cases that we've seen. So we know what people are looking for. We know what the common pain points are, and we're helping them understand how to think about creating a spec for an app that you're actually going to build. So next, we also have the authentication settings on like how your users are going to be able to log in. So once again, this is something that if you're using vibe coding, you really not knowing how to do this and relying only on the vibe coding tool is a gamble I would never take. I mean, everyone else, I wish them luck. But I think in our case, we don't want anyone to be riding on luck or vibes. We want them to know that they have something secure, that when they share that with their clients, because no one wants to risk telling a client that there could potentially be some type of problem or leak, this is all built in. So in this case, I'm going to allow our users to log in via email and Google. And I can also decide whether or not I want them to be able to just get to like a sign up page and sign up on their own, or if I have to give them access in order for them to actually log in. So I'm actually going to say, of course, that I want to be able to invite them. And then the typical things after this, I can choose the layout, I can choose the theming that I would want this app to have. And we have a lot of built-in theming already. You can also, of course, go in and customize, change anything you want. This is just us giving you a head start. And then you'll notice right over here, the AI co-builder has already given me the spec of exactly what it's about to build
Nice. Yeah, so you can check it as it goes along.
as it goes along. And it's what's truly amazing over here is now it's about to generate this database for you. This database is not a UI. It's not like a fake. This is the real database that it's spinning up right here. So when this generation is done, that's a database I can go in and edit in real time. I can see it happening in the flow, what it's building for me. Once again, best practices according to database schema, understanding the, I think one thing, just being a builder myself and having been around the block and seeing people can develop solutions in many different ways. Sometimes they over-engineer databases and they end up feeling those
Oh.
pains really heavily later down the line when they're actually building out their app. We rely on best practices that we also know on what should that database look like. If they want to add and grow it at any time, they can always add additional tables, additional columns. But we try to keep it pretty, we try to use what we know is already going to be best. And then obviously there's always the customization. You can go as far as you want and update as far as you want, but you wouldn't believe how long just even typing in these columns, getting them prepared can take, let alone trying to spec that out ahead of time. So
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I
this is
couldn't.
a big game changer.
Yeah, I don't even know if non-technical people have even thought this much through.
I can promise you right now, they haven't. And this is also what I was going to add. When we see users come in, they have this idea for an app. Where do things often go wrong? Almost always at the very beginning, which is just the database. Because if you don't set the database up correctly and you don't set these relationships up correctly between the tables, when you actually have to build and scale that app, you start to realize things don't work or why does this not work at scale? That actual database schema is one of the most important parts of building a fully functional, scalable application. So we really try to make it so that you don't actually have to have this knowledge. But because it's visual, because it's visible, you can go in and see where the relationships exist, how it works, and it can help you upskill yourself.
Hmm.
I had mentioned earlier in the call, why do people not adopt software? When there's a learning curve, when I have to figure it out, even watching content in support, listening to YouTube videos or watching education, it's investment of time. Right
Mhm.
now, we're saying you have AI as your support system, but also you can visually see how things look, how they work behind the scenes, and you can take them apart and think about why these relationships exist and how this works in the application. And I've seen people really upskill themselves just by being able to see and understand how those things work behind the scenes. And then, of course, now after it's worked with the database as well, it's now generating the entire application. So these are all of the pages of the application, like the actual overall project view, client details view. You can see right here, it's even identifying all of the pages that it's actually building within this app. And every single thing that you would need within this portal is being generated in real time right now across those pages within the app. So this is also, once again, like you can go in, you can edit it anytime afterwards, you can add new blocks, you can remove blocks, and I can also show something else that's pretty cool afterwards as well. But one thing, and by the way, this is dummy data that still exists in that database. So with other vibe coding tools, they might create that UI and it's just almost like this front end images that you still have to connect the database afterward. You still have to set
Okay.
up the database. Here, that database and this app is already connected together. So if you go into that database and you update the images across all of those projects, that's going to be updated in real time across this app because it's not just a
Wow.
fancy prototype. This is a real application and that data is already connected on the back end.
And look, your client portal is ready.
100%. Yeah. So right now, and I think it's going to probably iron out a couple more kinks, but I think I'm going to wait for that to
Yeah.
just finish. The moment that generation is done, and as you can see, it still has a few more, always still a few more pages to set up. Here we go. Now it's ready and you can actually
Okay.
go ahead and you can test it live. And one really nice thing that you can do is that you now see exactly. So for instance, I'm going in, I can add a project. So I just want to show something very quickly. So right now, if I go into that database and you can see all of these projects that I have in here, this is all dummy data in this database. But let's say that right now I want to add a project. I want to add a new project. So let's just put Shiran's project, whatever it's going to be in progress. Sure. And then I can choose exactly which client, who's the lead. Sure. I'm adding it. And now right over here, you'll notice that it's already been added to the database because
Wow.
everything is already connected. So this app is already ready to go in terms of this as well, right? You can see that same thing. Everything that I would need to have in a dashboard view is there. I can then go into my project screen. Oh yeah, here we go. And then you can see that right now, for instance, I can also go in and already see all of the details of the project. I can see the assets and everything related to it. And so all of this is really ready. And I think what's pretty incredible about this as well is when you start to really get into what are the user groups, what do I want different user groups to be able to see and do, all of this over here can be previewed. So for instance, let's say that you want to have your own reassurance that this person will never be able to access a different page that they shouldn't have access to. You can come in at any point and just preview these pages and always know that like exactly what this person will be able to see or what this groups of users will be able to see. And then one other thing I would add to that as well, right now, adding users is as simple as adding them here. You can see exactly what user group they belong to. So you'll always know who has access to what. You'll always be able to see how they can actually, whether or not they've been given login access and so on. And you can set those user groups up here, and this I'm calling this out because this is one of the most difficult parts of software building that I have still see so many vibe coding tools getting wrong and how disastrous it can be when it is wrong. I can set up all conditions that determine what defines a specific type of user. So right now, for instance, it could be that I set up their role inside of that database, but I could also decide that maybe there's other conditions I want to set that gives them this type of access. I can do all of that in this view.
Wow.
Same thing as I mentioned before, I can create workflows. So I can send one really cool use case that I'm doing currently. I record a lot of my meeting notes with Granola. I
Mhm.
have my meeting notes send directly into a Softr database. And that way, at the end of the day, I can go back and we have a cool feature called Ask AI, which is like an AI chatbot that I can review all of my calls that day and look for the patterns and specific types of things that came up, maybe insights that I want to grab, that I want to leverage, and so on. So what's really amazing is it's for portals. It's also for internal tooling. A lot of my internal tooling I do with it. It's whatever you really make it. It's very flexible. But I think what's most important is it's always in the secure environment. So you, even with Claude, I think Claude is very a big one where I hear very often now people come to Softr and they ask me, I built this really amazing thing on Claude, but I ran out of tokens. And now it's like, what do I do with it? Or how do I share it with my team? And it's okay, you can still actually build, you can still call LLMs from your Softr workflows and just build it as an app within Softr's secure environment so that now it becomes something that's not just living as your own personal assistant, but an app your team can leverage and it's secure. You can share it and they can also still be able to have the same benefits. And it's where your data is all stored in one place.
Wow. So can you import from what you've done in Claude to Softr?
I think right now we're actually becoming very soon. We will have MCP. It's
Oh, okay.
very close. I'm anxiously awaiting it. But even today, we have a CSV import. So oftentimes, if it generates CSV, you can put it in there. Once we have the connector, it's going to be even more incredible because you can delegate the tasks to Claude the ones that you just really make sense to spend the tokens on to delegate, but you can still
Mhm.
store your data in here and just keep it updating that one central.
That's incredible because I was going to ask you about that. I know Anthropic just recently said, hey, you can't link OpenClaw up to your Claude Pro account now. It's going to be based on usage tokens. And I know
Yeah.
a lot of people were upset with that. So, but this might be a solution for that.
Yeah. I think the way I always put it as well, really, is that so for instance, I think one good example is I was building out a demo for actually, I think it was an agency type of use case the other day. And the idea was okay, many consultants within agency, especially when they're generating some kind of SOW or they're scanning their email, they want to be able to take those and put them directly into where they house all of their documents across their leads, clients, and this stuff takes a lot of time. And so the idea is many of them are like, okay, we're using Claude to now on a daily basis check our emails and but it's a huge consumption for something that can very easily be achieved by automation, right? You can set up a regular trigger that, or even a webhook that searches your Gmail, looks for when it meets certain conditions, and then downloads the attachment that then you can call an LLM, have the LLM extract the text from the PDF, summarize it, and then you have an automation just send that attachment where it belongs in your database. Half of it can be automated, the rest of it can use AI wherever it's necessary. You don't actually need to use an LLM for the end-to-end systems a lot of the time. And I think for people in businesses, we can't only think about the excitement and shininess of AI. We also have to think about efficiency and like where does it make sense? When does it become more task creating versus task saving or time saving? And I think these are the areas where because Softr is so flexible, you really can fit it around your processes and inject AI where it makes the most sense.
Wow. So everything lives in your hosting thing.
Yeah.
Software's become the host.
Yes.
That's good. So what kind of security protections does Software have that makes sure that your data is protected?
So we already have GDPR, we have SOC 2 compliance, and I
Mm.
think what's more important aside from just that security lens is, and if I understand correctly, you asking what our protections are that are different from what other vibe coding tools might
Yes.
have. Okay, so I think that's part of it for sure. It's that security that we offer by default, but I think what's more important is that today when you're using a vibe coding tool and let's say like you're setting up a database or you're building an app, there's still a reliance on understanding what needs to be secure, what doesn't, and really being able to think almost step by step, what are the things that I have to put into place? So oftentimes, I don't think people are always thinking about okay, this user should only see this, user should only see
Right.
that. It's not just about being guided and knowing to create for that is one piece. The second piece is being able to actually understand where the vulnerabilities are and how to fix them. So are you going to be able to review the code and debug and make sure that there are no risks to that data? Not really. And so I think with Softr, as I mentioned before, in addition to just the enterprise grade security we have, right now I don't have to play any guessing games. I don't have to review code. I don't have to review a ton of code just to see what's actually happening or if I'm accidentally exposing data I shouldn't be. Right now, I can go in and I can see exactly what user groups I have and what type of access that they should have. And in the app itself, so one thing I'll just point out right here, I can set up, I can add a condition that says only, let's say, I only show the projects where it's the logged in users project. So only the logged in user will be able to actually will only the projects that will be visible will only be the logged in users projects, right? Or I can also determine based on visibility, I can just choose that this block will only be seen by logged in users, and the logged in users would be the agency admin, for instance. So I can get very granular with what I want to allow different types of user groups to see and do. But more importantly, I will always be able to go in and see that and know without having to do anything that wouldn't be within my wheelhouse, a skill set that I would be expected to know to have that kind of reassurance that those things are set up properly.
I love this. This seems like the perfect solution.
Yeah,
I
I like
know
to.
I did try to use a vibe coding tool last year and I just got stuck because I'm not a coder. I didn't know how to fix it. And I kept trying to have the AI fix it and it just would go in circles and just spending money and spending money. And I was like, all right, we got to shut this down.
Exactly, right? And one thing I would just add as well is that, so in addition to being able to call that AI back at any time and to continue editing, but you can also edit the blocks yourself visually. There's something else that's really cool because, okay, one question we get a lot is like, all right, great, like you have these blocks, but let's say I want a block that doesn't exist within Softr today. What do I do? Because that's where vibe coding is beneficial, right? Now with AI, people want what they want, exactly what they want, and they want
Right.
it right now. They don't want to wait for it. So there's no one has patience and no one it wants to bend on what they want. So we have something called our AI vibe coding block, which essentially to bring vibe coding into Softr, but in a very safe way. Because rather than me vibe coding an entire end-to-end app, and like I said, this is like raw code, this is a lot of code that you don't it's not in a secure and all of those things have to be set up. This vibe coding block is essentially like one block inside of your larger Softr application. So if something goes wrong with that block, everything is contained within this component. So you don't have to worry that if you break something here, it breaks it anywhere else in the application. It will only be contained within that block.
That's
So for
amazing.
and what's also amazing is like the other blocks, it can connect directly to the same data source and you can still choose the visibility. Everything can still be controlled from these custom, which by the way, no one else is doing like this. This is really unique. And I can say, okay, I want to see, I don't know if I hope these are like the data points that are inside that project. I'm going to see my projects in a Gantt view. Hopefully that the data inside of that table makes sense for it to show something like this. But what's really cool is then I can choose, okay, I want a different type of visualization or I want a different type of design to the component. You can always do that. You can always bring it in custom and it's always going to be you're still going to get the benefit of Softr, the connection to the data, the ability to set certain buttons and actions that go directly, like all of that you can do, but you have that kind of customization that you wouldn't have with the other building blocks. Although what I generally say is I'm like, you don't have to like why over engineer it, right? If we
Yeah.
have the blocks, why spend additional AI credits for something? And this is what people get frustrated with. It's, oh, I had to prompt every single time I wanted to change a button or change a text. And you'll notice right now, see, same projects, actual timeline and Gantt chart view, which I wouldn't have had. It doesn't exist within Softr today, but I was able to bring it in and still work with the same set of data. And now it's just within my Softr application.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And it's that easy.
Yeah.
We're doing this in real time.
That easy. It's real time. Yeah, exactly. And it's honestly really fun and empowering because when you
Yeah.
realize that it's something that's so easy, it's like all of a sudden you go from, oh, it's another software I really need to learn and figure out. And it's no, but I try to move away from, I think everything is about ideas at the end of the day. You have an idea for a problem, but I like to think of it more, okay, you have all of these painful things that exist within your daily business context. And it's like now, one by one, you are not limited in how you can solve them. And I
That,
think that's what really makes it powerful.
that is powerful for sure. and it empowers them to just keep doing their work and doing it the best that they can.
Exactly.
Wow. This has really been helpful. Thank you so much for showing us that.
Oh yeah, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to go on about it because this is the easiest part of my job. I love demoing Softr because I can sit and talk and describe it and it does all the work for me even as I'm doing that, right?
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Another aspect is the user psychology of this component of building and product-led growth. And you've spent a lot of time thinking about that. What separates tools that people try once from tools that they actually adopt and rely on?
Yeah, I think it goes back a lot to what I was saying previously. I think one, and to maybe take a step back in a
Hmm.
moment, I've seen how tech has changed over the years, and I've noticed that the amount of time people are willing to invest to learn has also changed. And I think time investment now really needs to translate to like what is the trade-off, right? So it's like, for instance, if this is one platform that I have to learn and it's really like it's either outdated and it's like I'm not getting any additional benefit besides being able to actually use that platform and I still have work to do, that's not a time investment that people really want to make, right? And I think the expectations have really changed in the market as well as things are expected to get more and more usable. And now with AI as well, it's actually no longer just the investment of my time in order to do a job. It's how will this investment look? Like now we know that everyone in senior leadership or executives across companies, they're saying we want AI. It's now starting to become more like an existential threat for many companies where they feel if we don't adopt and learn quickly enough, we are going to have our competition can get ahead of us. We might struggle to stay relevant. We need to make sure that we're hiring people that are actively, and this is new for many people, but everyone is now struggling. And it's the one thing I see everywhere. It's like, where do we invest our time? Because there's
Mhm.
no shortage of tools. So
Right.
I think when it comes to what people are going to adopt versus what they're going to try once, I think it needs to make sense. That time investment needs to directly translate into the gain, both
Mhm.
from a process standpoint of how well does this solve my pain points to is it worth my time and investment in order to solve those pain points? And I think that kind of goes into the next point as well, which is, you know, assuming that people are adopting which I would hope people are adopting software to solve key problems within their organization. Of course, there's software that's fun to adopt, but then there's
Mhm.
software, if I don't adopt it, this problem stays unsolved. And this can mean either A, needing to hire more headcount. More headcount means more inefficiency often. And now, especially with AI, how do we make sure that what we're adopting is actually going to drive that impact? And so I think how well it fits the pain point really matters. So if it's software that half solves it, but it's really expensive and really difficult to onboard, that's not going to cut it much longer for many people. And I think
Yeah.
that expectation of custom being able to go beyond what and touching upon SaaS and where SaaS is headed, I think we're less and less willing to invest in software that's very difficult to use if that trade-off is not going to be high impact.
That is perfectly into my next question because for companies that are deciding between buying another SaaS tool versus building something custom, you were kind of mentioning the trade-off and the time investment, but what is the real trade-off and where do you see the biggest return on investment? Is it building or buying?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'm someone who both we have purchased software even internally at Softr, but we also drink our own champagne. And I, for instance, if I can build it, I will always build it, especially now with AI, because now what I can build in Softr is just even a million times faster. I think I would put it this way. And I've seen a lot of software. I've been sat on a lot of demo calls where I have to sit through a huge presentation, most of which are features I will never ever need. And then what really sucks is to reach the end of that presentation, see the price, and think, wow, I have to invest that. And it's not just price, I have to invest that much money, that much time. I need this team member to help us implement it for 20% of the features that I'm actually going to get from this platform. Does that really make sense? But thinking about non-technical teams, remember that non-technical teams don't have often the skill set to get access to their data, access to visualize their data in really flexible ways, access to share that data or build those tools that essentially allow them to complete end-to-end workflows. Up until now, that really just hasn't been, till the emergence of these platforms, that hasn't been feasible. So you just had to be stuck with this and make it work. And I think
Yeah.
going back to this one more time, like where is the ROI? Where is the investment? I think at the end of the day, there's going to be core systems, core software systems where at scale, is it going to make sense to build it entirely? Probably not. For many companies that are thinking about CRMs at larger companies, that's one of the core central command center of where you are planning to collect, bringing in data, bringing in leads, tracking those life cycles. But then there's all of this tooling, all of this dashboarding, all these things that are just exist that are just as critical in order to get those leads into the funnel, in order to actually close them. But are all that software just as critical to spend time in the sense of, do you really want to have one additional piece of software for every single one of those use cases? And I think
Yeah.
where Softr and where building your own custom tools comes in handy is that the pain point you have at that moment, the problem you need to solve in that moment, you can spin up a tool for. Does
Yeah.
it change? Does that workflow evolve? You evolve the workflow. You do it all in one place. You build your suite of tools all in one place. Your data is all in one place. And I think when you have that, when you can reduce down your tech stack, it means that when you are investing time into learning software that you've brought into your organization, it's the right time being spent. And then you're building the things that are truly custom for what you need, both in that moment, but built to scale for longevity. I think that's where I stand and what I've seen is that it's not really a build or buy for your overall tech stack. Like, should you build everything? Should you buy everything? But
Mhm.
more like, what is the right software to purchase? And then when does it make sense for your entire team? What will help them move faster when it comes to actually building the tooling that they need beside it? And way more use cases than you could possibly imagine is this relevant for.
Yeah. And I think for non-technical teams and people like myself, I see all these great features and tools and platforms, and I'm like, I can't use them. I don't know code and everything. And it really is frustrating because I'm like, this is AI. I should be able
Yeah.
to do it. And so, how do you see the role of non-technical teams evolving as AI continues to improve, especially when it comes to building or owning their own software?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think what's interesting is that there's definitely a trend happening in the space right now. It's like this, call it what you want. In my domain, for instance, it's funny. It's actually 10 years ago when I started and I became super automation heavy. I was too technical. Like, I couldn't relate to most marketers because that's not where my, even sometimes for marketing operators, this is my space, this is my domain, and I'm a builder at heart. But then also not technical enough for developers, right?
Right.
I put myself in the room with all developers anyway, and I learned a lot from them, but I always had a little bit of do I have the right to be here? And that's a tension that if I hadn't been in the space, if I hadn't discovered automation as early on as I did and fell in love with it the way I did, and it really came from the freedom that came alongside it, I don't know if I would have had the courage to just discover and do these things completely on my own. But now, once again, going back to where we are today, now it's not really an option. Now there's this new expectation, which is that no, you are, and for better, for worse. And I think that in some aspects it does make sense. In others, I'm waiting to see where that goes. But I
Mhm.
think one thing is true that you do need to this rise of this marketing engineer, this like sales engineer, all these things where it's like you're now expected to be able to operate, to understand how your systems work, be able to build. Like, we don't have time. We don't have time for 5 people in a workflow to get something done. Now we need a person to understand the process, own it, and execute on it without needing more in that workflow. And so I think with that in mind, I see that now the conditions in the market are really set for this kind of idea of now non-technical teams are going to realize that it exists, that this tension exists, that this need to like upskill exists. Why I really believe that operational tooling is the best, and I'm biased, but I think is one of the best avenues to go down, because obviously AI is a broad spectrum, is that at the end of the day, the biggest problem that comes in with having like all these pain points in these processes is that we don't have time for our own ideas anymore. We don't have time to do the things
Right.
that our job requires of us. And now with more AI, more and more AI, what time do we have? We're spending now more time adopting and learning. When we think about ideas, I always tell everyone has now also ideas for AI. That's great. But ideas are where that should be your thinking. That should be where your brain is invested. And AI should be doing all the things that actually prevent you from being able to have time for your ideas and for the work that is going to get you visible in front of your stakeholders, is going to get you visible from leadership, is going to get you visible when it comes to it's the end of the quarter. Where are we? And have you executed and have you seen the results of your work? I think despite what a lot of people think today, I don't think saying I adopted AI is actually going to be the answer, right? It's what was the actual impact of what you've done, whether that's building the system or doing this. I think when you actually have to think about real world impact, thinking from the start of not my ideas, but my pain points, these are the biggest things preventing us from being able to move faster, from being able to compete faster. That's when you start to see that solving these operational pain points with AI, automation, app building is really going to be the difference, in all honesty.
That's an interesting point because if you can overcome your operational pain points with AI right now and with tools like Softr, then maybe you can implement your ideas later on. But you do need to show the value of AI first to your organization and your stakeholders, like you said. And then maybe you can have time later on to do your ideas after you've solved those pain points.
Or, as I would probably say, my own personal bias is that if we all outsource our creative thinking to AI, and maybe from a marketing lens, if all of a sudden all my messaging is coming from AI, then we're all going to start looking the same, which a lot
Yeah.
of it is happening already. How great would it be to actually leverage AI in the places where it is behind the scenes, but they're the things that give me more time to devote to thinking creatively so that we can stand out in a crowded space? Putting AI where it belongs, I think, is not to say there aren't creative applications for AI. I just think these are the places where it's so easy to demonstrate ROI because you know what the bottlenecks are, you know how long it takes you to get them done, and now you can make really great headway on solving them.
I love that. Don't outsource your creativity to
Give
AI.
yourself more time to think creatively, right?
I
That's
love
what,
that. Yeah,
yeah,
that's great advice.
yeah.
And before we wrap up, I always love to ask, when you do step away from your work, what are some activities or hobbies that you're passionate about?
Yeah. Sadly, I do love building tools and apps, so that is part of my hobby, admittedly. But
Yep.
no, I'm a big traveler. I've lived abroad for a long time, so I like to spend the rest of my time touching grass and just remembering what it's like to exist in the world and get to travel and see other places and have the time I need away from the digital space.
Yeah, that's important to decompress too. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you, Sharon, for sharing your insights on how AI is changing the way businesses build software and what it really takes to drive adoption in a real world business setting. I appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, yeah. And for those of you who'd like to learn more about Softr, you can visit their website at softr.io. Keeping you connected to tomorrow. Today, this is Alicia with AInews.com.